Hey guys, it's Jen, and I am going to share a process video with you today. Before I start, I wanted to, I wanted to start with something a little bit different. A lot of times when I'm making a layout, I just go for it and just let the products or the photos inspire me. But sometimes I need a little extra motivation, or sometimes I just want to get out of my comfort zone or try a different technique. And so I have a Pinterest board that's called Inspiration, and there I just pin anything that kind of sparks an idea, or that I might want to try on a layout, or I pin mood boards there. I've heard a lot of people say that mood boards, they don't really get them, or they don't know how to interpret them to something that works for them. I have a bunch of mood boards that, well, I hope that you can see this, that I pinned recently. And basically what it is a collection of photos or different things that convey a certain mood, and often there's a color scheme included. And they make them a lot for fashion and for home decor and stuff like that. But they're really fun to use and interpret for scrapbooking. And so I thought I would share a few of the different ways that I interpret mood boards, because there's several ways that you can go about it. So, for example, one of the ways is, like this one specifically, would be awesome to interpret this as a design for a layout using a bunch of triangles in a configuration like this. It also comes with a color scheme, so that's another jumping off point for a layout. Another way that I would interpret this is more literally, like using fonts like this, or something like that. So that kind of mood is conveyed. There's also feathers in here, and florals, which give kind of a softer feminine feel. So even though the color scheme can be somewhat masculine, you've got that feminine feel to it. And so that's just another thing that could maybe urge you to include some softer shapes on your layout or something like that. Something like this I thought was a fun way to kind of like haphazardly put stuff on a layout. This again could just be interpreted. You could use the layout, you could use the colors, you could use the way, like something that stood out to me was the way that this tag is overlapped on the photo, or the way the A is clipped to another little piece of paper there, or just little things like that that spark some sort of interest in me. So today I am going to use this as kind of my inspiration. And the two things that really stood out on this mood board to me was the fact that half of the photo is covered with, like, the photo is two-toned, but it looks like half the photo is covered with a piece of vellum, which I think is a really cool look, and that's something that I might want to try. So I'm going to see what I can do to try that. And also I like the grid design, but with maybe blocks of, these are all squares, but like I thought maybe blocking off a piece like that with another triangle here, and just playing with triangles and squares and making a sort of grid layout where some of them are photos and some of them are cardstocks and patterned papers. So I'm going to try that. Maybe not necessarily the color scheme, but that's another way you could go. So I hope that's been helpful for you, and now I will put you on fast forward and get to work.
Okay, so here I am starting out with that piece of vellum. Like I said, I wanted to emulate um, that look on the photo from the mood board. And so I'm just cutting a piece of vellum to match the size of my photo, and then I will cut that diagonally. And I found that that was the easiest way for me to do that. So I'm using, I think it's a 6x8 photo. So I just trimmed that, and then I'm using my ruler, which I should have used a ruler with a metal edge because I'm using my X-Acto knife, but I didn't, and it was fine. um, but I am cutting that to fit the top of the photo. I purposely picked a photo that had a lot of space that if you covered it up, you could still tell what it was, but it wasn't super important that you saw every detail. And so those ducks are the perfect thing to kind of cover up. And there's still a duck peeking out at the bottom, so you definitely know what you're looking at. So I'm using two photos. I had three out, but I couldn't quite figure out a way to do the design that I wanted with all three photos, and these two photos told the story well enough. So um, the other smaller photo is 3 by 4, and so what I've decided to do is cut all of my pieces to make my design in um, 3" by 3" squares or 3 by 6" strips, and then I am cutting them into triangles, and I'm just going to kind of arrange them here on the page. So that paper I just cut was, I believe, We Are Memory Keepers, or it could have been Gossamer Blue. It came in the Scraptastic kit. That green stripe is a super old Amy Tangerine paper, and then the paper that I'm cutting now with those little V's or little hearts on it um, is from the new Amy Tangerine Stitched collection, and I'm going to use both sides of that. So here you can see I'm just measuring 3" and I am cutting a triangle off of the end of that 6" strip. So I'm not cutting it diagonally from end to end. I'm making kind of 3" increments. And then I can use the other side of it in another spot. So I'm going to play around quite a bit with how I want to balance these different pattern papers. I'm using the blues from the kit and a little bit of the gray because the gray kind of matches the tone of the water and of the ducks. But I realize my daughter is wearing bright pink shorts, and so I'm going to bring pink in as an accent color. So I'm just kind of keeping that in mind and trying to keep everything else relatively, well, I'm not making it very pattern heavy because the design is very bold on its own. I don't want to have really bold patterns. So I did pull out this yellow paper that's from a previous Scraptastic kit. I think it's a Studio Calico paper from their Lemon Lush collection. I can't remember exactly. I played with it for a little bit, but the yellow is just a little bit too much. There's not any yellow in the photos, and it would have worked okay, but it just, I guess, it didn't end up being quite what I was going for. So I do end up taking that off eventually. But it'll stay for a minute, and I like the way the diagonal stripes look, but I already have some diagonal stripes going on. So I'm just kind of playing around. I want things to kind of go off the edges, and so I am purposely not lining things up exactly straight because I want to make sure that things go off the edges. So I was feeling like the design was getting a little bit heavy and it needed some whiteness, and so I pulled out this super, super, super old scrap of Scenic Route paper, if anybody remembers that company. I think it's, I don't even know how old it is. It's really old. But it's just this lined paper, and it goes perfectly because the lines are kind of that aqua color. And so I'm going to use that in a few places to kind of balance everything out. And I'm being really conscious of where I'm placing the different colors. That gray is really heavy, and so I'm making sure that I balance that across the page. The green stripe is very bold, so I'm making sure that is well balanced across the page. And then all of the aqua is kind of, it's kind of light and airy, and so that can be my filler. And so I'm just playing around getting that exactly how I like it. I'm pretty fussy when it comes to balance, and I didn't want too many of the same thing right next to each other or anything like that. So I'm just being really picky and playing around with it. That is what took up most of the time for this layout. This layout took maybe about an hour and a half, and most of that was kind of fussing around. And then a little bit of it was, you'll see in a minute here, I'm going to stitch all of these pieces down. So that's what took a lot of time as well. So I'm just cutting those squares in half diagonally to make my triangle pieces. And I'm leaving some of the pieces square and cutting some of them diagonally. And I'm cutting them different ways diagonally, so there's a variation, if that makes sense. Some go from right to left, or yeah, the top right to the bottom left, and some go from the top left to the bottom right. So I'm just keeping that varied there. And then there was one little spot I could not figure out what paper to put there to make sure everything balanced. So I just brought in another paper and switched a couple things out. This is kind of a creamy grid, And I'm okay mixing cream and white. And then I'm just going to start gluing everything down to my background, which is just a piece of white cardstock that came in the kit. I believe it's American Crafts textured cardstock. And I was going to leave a white space between each of the triangles, the ones that are split in half, but then I realized things wouldn't quite line up if I did that. There would be too much space in between, so I just decided to um, glue them right next to each other, and I think it looks great. So just adhering everything down. And I'm not being super particular about whether things are exactly straight. I'm just not that way. Even though this is a grid, I want it to be sort of straight and pretty. I didn't get out the ruler. I didn't, I'm just not that fussy. I really like the way that gray triangle looks on that photo, and it really brings your attention just to the ducks and to my daughter, and I just really like the way that worked out. That was kind of lucky. Um, so just gluing the last few pieces here, and then I will go ahead and trim off the outside edges. So lots to trim off here. I'll have lots of little scraps. And I'll probably end up keeping those scraps. I like to back like silhouette cuts or, die cuts that I do with my silhouette with strips or scraps of paper. So I'll probably just keep these and do something like that with them. So like I said, I am going to end up stitching all of those squares down. So I'm going to take my layout over to my sewing machine, and with the magic of television, not really television, I come back and it's all stitched, and I'm sorry because this is blurry for just a second, but all I'm doing is pulling the threads through to the back. So rather than just clipping the fronts, I like to pull the thread that's hanging down in the front through the paper to the back, and then I just tape them all down. So that's what I'm doing now, and I really love the way this turned out. And on the photo where I have the vellum, I just stitched right around the photo. And hopefully in a second here you'll see that along all the edges, I stitched just off the page. So it looked like the stitching was meant to go along with the rest of the paper that isn't on the page. I don't know if that really makes sense, but yeah, I had that goal in mind. So yeah, I'm just securing the loose threads with some washi tape, and that'll take me a minute. This is why this layout took so long. It wasn't super complicated. It's just fussing around getting the patterns right, and then when I decided to stitch, that was a lot more work, and then pulling the threads through and taping them to the back. So that it's not hard, but it just takes a while. So I'm really sorry because this is just blurry and I should have just cut this out, but I decided not to. So so you're just going to see me do it. And then I'm just trimming off the ends of the threads. And like I said, I just really love the way that the stitching stood out. It made the pieces all stand out. And I thought about roughing up the edges along where I stitched, but I ended up just leaving them flat, and it just gives an extra little special touch. And so I'm really sorry that this is not in focus, but in just a minute it will be again. So I pulled out the Amy Tan clear stickers to see what I could add, and I decide that first, before I decide to add anything else, I'm going to work on my title. So I'm using those gray Ellie Studio stickers that came in the kit, and I'm spelling out a really clever title, and it's Feeding the Ducks. So I just decided not to get too crazy on this, and I'm just using a piece of wax paper to put down my title. And in a second here, I can't decide what I want to use for the word ducks, so I go through my thickers and I pull out a few different ones, and none of them quite fit the bill. I didn't want to do gray, like my subtitle in gray and the word ducks in gray as well. I thought that was a little bit too much gray. And so I'm just trying out a bunch of different things. I thought about using these green ones to bring out the green, but then I thought I didn't want to draw too much attention to the green because of my daughter's pink shorts. So I thought about pink, and then I decided no on that. So I tried out a bunch of options, and in the end, I go with these stickers that are um, different shades of teal, and I go with a really, really light shade of that aqua color, simply because those are the letters that I had that spelled out the word ducks. I had enough in that same shade, and so that's what I decide. And I think I'm going to put it here for now. I will leave it there, but I end up changing my mind. Um, Now, some of the video got a little bit cut off, so I've just pulled out some of the Amy Tan Stitched Ephemera pack, and the um, that's what the camera's from, and there's a little thing at the bottom which you cannot see right now, a little die cut, and that pinkish red photo corner is also from the Amy Tan die cut pack, as well as that gray striped photo corner that's on top of the vellum. And I'm just placing my title. I decided to put it up here on this top piece of that kind of aqua colored pattern. And I'm using some of the puffy stickers from the Ellie Studio puffy stickers that we got, and that's how I'm bringing in a little bit of that pink with the heart. And then that little teal banner is also from the puffy stickers. And this little date that I'm stamping with my Chamel date stamp, but that little date tab is from the Scraptastic exclusive printables. And so I'm bringing the pink there. And now I decide I need one more area where I can place the pink, so because I feel like I need 3 little spots to just bring in that color. I haven't decided exactly what I want to do with it yet, so I'm going ahead and sticking down that camera on some foam dots because I know I want that there, and that striped photo corner on the vellum. I'm going to play around with that Stay Curious sticker a lot, but I'm not going to end up using it. I do put that gray sticker, a memory, I think it says a memory recorded, and then I use those circles to kind of mimic the circles on the bottom little tag thingy that says never forget it, and then I added in that flare badge with those circles, and that kind of plays off the little bottom die cut. I'm just writing my journaling now, and I'm just kind of talking about how it's interesting how kids can get so much enjoyment and hours of just feeding the ducks and throwing them bread. And I don't get enjoyment from that anymore, but what I do get enjoyment from, or what brings me joy, is watching my kids. I only have one kid, that's my niece. Watching my daughter and my niece have so much fun doing it. So that's what brings me joy now. And I think that pretty much finishes up. Oh, I'm going to put another puffy sticker in the center of that camera. Bring that dark teal down there. And then I am going to just make sure that those stickers aren't going to fall off by using some of my Scotch Quick Dry adhesive to secure those down. And that is going to finish off my layout. In a second here, I will post a picture of that mood board again, so you can kind of see how my page compares to the mood board and what cues I kind of took from it, and that will be my layout. I hope that this was a kind of a fun and different thing for you, and if you end up using this mood board to create a layout or any mood board, please link to your pages below because I would love to see them. And here are the close-ups, and thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.